This story is titled, My Brother Tricked My Ex-Fiancée. On the day of our wedding, my brother convinced my ex-fiancée that I had cheated. She believed him, and years later my mother messaged me, "Hey everyone, before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together." Thanks so much! Now, let's start the video. Alright Reddit, this is going to be a long one. I've been sitting on this story for years, but after what happened last week, I need to get it off my chest. Also, this is my throwaway account because some people involved know my main. I, Michael, 32 male, grew up in Minnesota, one of those mid-sized towns where everyone knows everyone else's business but pretends they don't. You know the type, where the biggest drama is usually which neighbor forgot to mow their lawn, or who got caught speeding by the one traffic camera in town. My family was pretty average, middle class. Dad worked as a construction foreman, still does. Actually, and Mom's been at the local library so long they named a reading corner after her. Then there's my younger brother, Ethan, 29 male. But we'll get to him. Oh boy, will we get to him. Growing up, Ethan and I were what you'd call differently motivated. I was the responsible one, not some genius or perfect kid or anything, just normal. Got B's and the occasional A, played baseball, made varsity junior year but mostly rode the bench, and spent my weekends learning about cars at my Uncle Tom's auto shop. Uncle Tom was this old school mechanic type, you know, the kind who could diagnose an engine problem just by listening to it. He took me under his wing when I was 15, taught me everything from oil changes to transmission work. Those weekends in the shop probably kept me out of a lot of trouble. Ethan, though, man, where do I even start? He was always different, not in a quirky, endearing way, but in that way that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up sometimes. He needed to be the center of attention 24/7. Like, if I got a B+ on a test, he'd suddenly have these elaborate stories about how his teacher said he was the smartest kid they'd ever taught. Spoiler alert, they didn't. If I made varsity baseball, he'd start telling everyone he was being scouted for some elite soccer team. He wasn't even on the school team. It was exhausting, but we all just kind of rolled with it. That's just how Ethan became the family motto. After high school, I did what most kids in our town did, went to the local community college, studied business management because it seemed practical, you know. Meanwhile, Ethan did what Ethan does best, started strong and crashed spectacularly. He convinced our parents to help him with tuition at this fancy private college 2 states over, lasted exactly 1.5 semesters before dropping out, claimed the professors couldn't handle his creative energy or some BS like that. Our parents, man, this is where things get frustrating. They always had this weird blind spot when it came to Ethan. Every time he messed up, they had an excuse ready. When he dropped out, he's finding his path. When he couldn't hold down a job, he's too creative for traditional employment. When he borrowed, stole money, and never paid it back, he's just going through a rough patch. Meanwhile, I was busting my ass, working my way up from the warehouse floor at this furniture distribution company. Started in shipping and receiving, learning every part of the business I could. Wasn't glamorous work, lot of heavy lifting, dealing with truckers, managing inventory, but it was honest, came with benefits, and I was good at it. Made assistant manager after 3 years, which isn't too shabby for a guy with just a community college degree. Had my own apartment, decent car, 2015 Civic, nothing fancy but reliable, and enough savings to start thinking about maybe buying a house someday. Life was actually pretty good for a while there. I had my routine, work during the week, helping Uncle Tom with the occasional weekend project at the shop, watching Vikings games with my buddies, going to trivia night at O'Malley's on Thursdays. Dating scene was okay. Nothing serious. But I wasn't really looking for serious at the time. Ethan would pop in and out of our lives, usually when he needed money or a place to crash after his latest entrepreneurial venture failed. He tried everything, crypto trading, lost all his money, starting a YouTube channel, 3 subscribers, all family, selling some sketchy supplements, pretty sure that was a pyramid scheme. So, Ethan met Laura at some charity event in 2016. She was this pediatric nurse, absolutely gorgeous, but not in that Instagram influencer way, more like that natural, doesn't even know how pretty she is way. Smart as hell, too. First time I met her was at our parents' house for Sunday dinner, and she spent like 20 minutes explaining to my dad about some new treatment they were using at the children's hospital. You could tell she really cared about her patients, wasn't just doing it for the paycheck. The weird thing was, nobody could figure out why she was with Ethan. Like, this woman had her life together, good career, her own apartment, volunteer work at the animal shelter, the whole package. Meanwhile, Ethan was, well, Ethan. He just failed at starting a premium dog walking service. Spoiler, he walked exactly 2 dogs before deciding it was beneath him and was living in our parents' basement temporarily while his next big idea took shape. But somehow, they ended up dating for 3 whole years. And, man, those 3 years were a masterclass in red flags that we all just ignored because, honestly, I don't even know why anymore. Ethan was obsessed with her in this really uncomfortable way. He had to know where she was all the time. Would show up at her workplace with lunch, even though she told him not to. Got weird if she hung out with her friends without him. He'd post these long, rambling Facebook statuses about how she was his world and his everything, you know, the kind of stuff that sounds romantic if you're 14, but gets creepy real quick when you're pushing 30. Laura would barely even like these posts, which would send him into these moods where he'd mope around for days. The real kicker was how he'd act at family gatherings. If Laura was talking to anyone else, literally anyone, could be our 80-year-old neighbor Miss S. Peterson, Ethan would suddenly appear and insert himself into the conversation. He'd put his arm around Laura's waist in this really possessive way, or start talking over whoever she was speaking with. One time, my cousin Matt was asking Laura about some medical stuff he was thinking about nursing school, and Ethan literally stood between them like some kind of deranged bouncer. I tried to talk to my parents about it once. Mom just said, "Oh, he's just so in love with her." Dad mumbled something about young people these days and went back to watching the game. Even Laura's friends seemed concerned. I overheard them at a barbecue once, trying to talk to her about Ethan's behavior, but she just brushed it off. Then came Memorial Day 2019. It's weird how you can wake up on a completely normal day, not knowing that by sunset your whole life is going to be different, you know? It was supposed to be just another family barbecue. Dad was doing his thing at the grill, burning burgers while insisting they were perfectly caramelized. Mom was fussing over her potato salad, and everyone was just hanging out in the backyard. Laura had been quiet all day, which wasn't like her. Ethan was doing his usual peacocking, telling everyone about his latest business idea, something about artisanal pet rocks. I kid you not. We were all sitting around the patio table when Laura suddenly stood up. She had this look on her face, kind of determined but also scared. She cleared her throat and just dropped the bomb. "I need to say something," she said. And everyone got quiet because Laura never really spoke up like that. "I have feelings for someone else. For Michael." The first legit choked on my beer like full-on spit take. Started coughing, the whole 9 yards because what the actual? I had never, and I mean never, given Laura any indication I was interested in her. Hell, I'd helped Ethan plan their anniversary dinner just a month before. The silence that followed was the kind you can actually feel. You could hear the ice melting in people's drinks. Then Ethan, oh man, Ethan went nuclear. He jumped up so fast, he knocked over his chair, started screaming about how he'd always known. There was something between us, how I'd been trying to steal her from the beginning. He was getting right up in my face, spittle flying everywhere, veins popping in his neck. Laura just stood there, watching this all go down with this weird, calm expression. Then she turned to Ethan and said, "This is exactly why I'm leaving. Everything always has to be about you. She grabbed her purse and walked out. Just left. The party basically imploded after that. Ethan stormed off to his basement lair. Mom was crying. Dad was stress grilling more burgers nobody was going to eat that night. Laura sent Ethan a text breaking up with him officially. She blocked him on everything full digital scorched earth. Then she tried to message me on Facebook, but I shut that down immediately. Sent her a quick, "I'm not interested. Please don't contact me again," and blocked her too. I wanted nothing to do with whatever game she was playing. Now, here's where things get really messed up. The first few weeks after Laura left, Ethan went completely off the grid. Wouldn't come out of the basement, wouldn't answer calls, just ordered delivery and played video games all day. Mom was worried sick, obviously, but I figured he just needed time to process everything. Man, was I wrong. He wasn't hiding, he was planning. It started so subtle that I almost thought I was imagining things at first. Like, my buddy Mark stopped asking me to come over for our usual Sunday football watching. When I ran into him at the grocery store and asked what was up, he got all weird and said something about not wanting drama. Turns out, Ethan had been telling him I'd been making fun of his new truck behind his back, saying he was compensating for something which was total BS. Mark had gotten a great deal on that F-150, and I'd even helped him pick it out. Then my friend Chris started acting cold. Found out later Ethan had convinced him I was only hanging out with him to get closer to his sister who, by the way, was happily married and lived in Florida. One by one, these little friendship bombs kept going off. The worst part was, Ethan's lies didn't even need to make sense. He just kept repeating them until people started believing there must be some truth to them. But Ethan wasn't satisfied with just messing with my social life. Oh no, he had to go after my job too. I'd been at the furniture distribution center for 5 years at this point, worked my way up from unloading trucks to shipping supervisor. Had a good team, decent relationship with management, the whole thing. Then the whispers started. First, it was just little things. Someone mentioned they'd heard I was job hunting, no big deal. People look for better opportunities. All the time, right? But then the rumors got worse. There was talk that I was fudging inventory numbers, selling stuff out the back door. My boss, Tom, who I'd worked with for years, started double-checking all my paperwork. He never said anything directly, but I could tell he was watching me closer than before. One day, I overheard 2 of my coworkers talking in the break room. They were discussing how someone had told them I was bad-mouthing the company to our competitors, trying to take our client list with me when I left. I wanted to burst in there and defend myself, but what could I say? My psycho brother is spreading lies about me? Yeah, that would have gone over real well. The crazy thing is, Ethan didn't even work in my industry. He didn't know our competitors or our clients, but he knew exactly how to plant seeds of doubt. He'd strike up conversations with delivery drivers, chat with salespeople who came to the warehouse, even reached out to some of our regular customers through LinkedIn, just casual conversations that always somehow turned to concerns about me. I tried talking to my parents about what was happening, showed them texts from friends who'd stopped talking to me, explained about the work situation. You know what my mom said? "Oh, honey, Ethan's just struggling right now. You know how he gets when he's upset. Just give him time." Dad just grunted and changed the subject to the Vikings' latest losing streak. The real kick in the teeth came during Christmas that year. I'd been saving up to buy something special for this girl I'd started seeing, had $500 in cash in my desk drawer at our parents' house, where I still kept some stuff. The money disappeared during our family Christmas dinner. When I brought it up, Mom actually said, "Maybe Ethan borrowed it and forgot to tell you." Borrowed? Who borrows money from a locked desk drawer without asking? But here's the thing about Ethan's revenge campaign. It wasn't just about hurting me, it was about isolation. Every friend he drove away, every coworker he turned against me, every family member he poisoned with his lies. It was all about making sure I had nowhere to turn when he finally made his big move. And man, did he have a big move planned. What kills me is how patient he was about it all. This wasn't just some angry ex-boyfriend lashing out, this was calculated. He spent months, almost a year, laying the groundwork, setting up his pieces like some twisted chess game, and I just kept thinking, he'll get over it eventually. He'll move on. I remember this one night, about 8 months after the Laura incident. I was at O'Malley's, our local bar, having a beer after work. Ethan came in with some friends. First time I'd seen him out in ages. He acted totally normal, came over, said hi, even bought me a drink. I actually thought maybe things were getting better. Maybe he was finally moving past it all. God, I was so naive. Because while I was sitting there thinking my little brother was finally growing up, he was actually setting up the next phase of his plan. He introduced me to this woman as his old friend from college. Yeah, she'd play a big role later, but we'll get to that part of the story soon enough. God, I was so naive. So, I met Olivia in October 2020, and honestly, after everything that had happened with Ethan's revenge campaign, I almost didn't go to the wedding where we met. My cousin Annie was getting married, and Olivia was her hairdresser. They'd become friends over the years, which is how Olivia ended up being invited to the actual wedding and not just doing hair for the bridal party. I was in a pretty dark place back then. Most of my old friends had bought into Ethan's lies. Work was stressful because of all the rumors, and I'd basically become this hermit who only left the house for work and groceries. Mom kept trying to get me to patch things up with Ethan like I was the one who needed to fix things. Dad had taken to leaving the room whenever any kind of conflict came up, which was his way of dealing with everything. The wedding was at this renovated barn venue outside of town. I was sitting at the random singles table, mentally counting down the minutes until I could leave without seeming rude, when Olivia sat down next to me. She had this green dress on and was carrying 2 pieces of wedding cake. She put one plate in front of me and said, "You look like you could use some sugar therapy." Just like that, we got to talking, and it was just easy. You know how sometimes you meet someone and there's no awkward small talk, no trying to impress each other, just genuine conversation? That was Olivia. She owned this small salon downtown, loved true crime documentaries. We had a whole debate about making a murderer, and had this really dry sense of humor that just clicked with mine. She told me about how she'd built her business from scratch, starting by doing haircuts in her apartment during college, and eventually saving enough to rent her own space. I told her about work at the warehouse, and instead of finding it boring, she actually asked really thoughtful questions about logistics and management. When I mentioned I helped my uncle with cars on weekends, her eyes lit up because she'd been wanting to learn basic car maintenance. Here's the thing about Olivia that I didn't fully appreciate until later. She was really good at reading people, like, scary good. The first time she met Ethan, which I'd put off for as long as possible, she saw right through him. This was at Thanksgiving 2020, about a month after we started dating. Ethan was doing his usual routine, being overly friendly, telling exaggerated stories, trying to be the center of attention. Olivia just watched him with this look on her face, like she was solving a puzzle. After dinner, she pulled me aside and said, "Your brother's got some serious issues with you, doesn't he?" Not judging, just observing. When I told her about the Laura situation and everything that followed, she didn't think I was being paranoid like everyone else had. That's actually what made Ethan hate her so much, I think. He couldn't manipulate her. He tried his usual tactics, telling her concerning things about me, trying to plant doubts, but Olivia would just call him out directly. Like this one time at a family dinner, Ethan started telling this story about how he'd heard I was bad-mouthing Olivia to my coworkers. Instead of getting upset, Olivia just looked him dead in the eye and said, "That's a pretty serious accusation, Ethan. Want to tell me who exactly you heard this from?" He stammered something about protecting his sources and changed the subject. Our relationship moved pretty fast after that. Olivia had this tiny apartment above her salon, and I started spending more and more time there. It was like a safe haven from all the drama Ethan had created in my life. We'd cook dinner, watch documentaries, and just talk for hours. She taught me about hair color chemistry, which is actually fascinating, and I taught her how to change her oil and check her tire pressure. I proposed 6 months after we met. I know, that seems really fast, but when you know, right? I did it at her salon after hours, had this whole thing planned where I pretended I needed a haircut. And when she turned me around in the chair to face the mirror, I was holding the ring. She laughed so hard she snorted, then said yes. That's when Ethan really amped up his game. It was like he couldn't stand seeing me happy. The rumors at work got worse. He started showing up at Olivia's salon as a customer, making weird comments to her other clients. He even tried to report her to the state board for some made-up health code violation. Nothing came of it, but she had to deal with an inspection. Olivia handled it all with this amazing grace. She'd just document everything, keep records of his harassment, stay professional. He's trying to make us react, she'd say. Don't give him the satisfaction. I loved her even more for that. We set the wedding date for June 2021. Looking back, I should have known Ethan wouldn't let it happen without trying something. But I was so caught up in wedding planning, in this bubble of happiness with Olivia, that I missed all the signs. Olivia noticed them, though. She kept saying something felt off about Ethan's sudden switch to being supportive of our marriage. I should have listened to her. God, I should have listened. The night before my wedding was probably the last time I felt truly peaceful. Isn't that weird? Like your whole world is about to shatter into a million pieces, but you're just sitting there, completely clueless, watching The Office reruns and eating pizza. I'd decided to stay at the Holiday Inn near the venue. Olivia was doing the traditional thing with her bridesmaids at her parents' house. And honestly, I just wanted some quiet time. The last few months had been a whirlwind of wedding planning, dealing with family drama, and trying to keep Ethan's increasingly erratic behavior in check. Looking back, there were so many red flags in the weeks leading up to the wedding. Ethan had suddenly become helpful, like suspiciously helpful. He'd volunteered to handle some of the vendor communications, offered to coordinate with the hotel about room blocks, even helped Mom with the seating arrangements. At the time, I thought maybe he'd finally grown up, Maybe seeing me and Olivia so happy had made him realize he needed to let go of his anger. Olivia wasn't buying it, though. Something's off, she kept saying. He's being too nice. But I brushed it off, told her she was just stressed about the wedding. God, I was such an idiot. That last night, I ordered a pepperoni pizza and buffalo wings from this local place near the hotel, turned off my phone because it kept blowing up with last-minute wedding questions. I remember thinking how nice it was to just have a moment of peace. I even wrote in this little journal Olivia had given me she thought it would be nice to document our journey together. The last entry I wrote was about how excited I was to start our life together. The next morning started normally enough. My best man, Dave, one of the few friends who'd seen through Ethan's BS over the years, came by to help me get ready. We were joking around, him trying to pretend he hadn't lost the rings twice already that morning. The weather was perfect, one of those rare Minnesota June days where it's not too hot and not too humid. I got to the church early. Olivia and I had picked this beautiful old Presbyterian church downtown, all stained glass and dark wood. Not because we were particularly religious, but because Olivia had fallen in love with the architecture. I was standing in the vestibule, adjusting my tie for the 100th time, when I saw her parents arrive. They walked right past me without a word. At first, I thought maybe they hadn't seen me, but then I noticed Mrs. Carter, Olivia's mom, was crying. Not happy wedding day tears. These were different. Mr. Carter looked like he wanted to punch something or someone. That's when I saw Ethan standing with this woman near the church office. I recognized her immediately. She was the old friend from college he'd introduced at O'Malley's months ago. She was showing something on her phone to Olivia's parents, and Ethan had this look on his face, this concerned, sympathetic expression that made my stomach drop. Dave noticed something was wrong and went to check what was happening. He came back white as a sheet. "Michael," he said, "you need to see this." But before I could even move, Olivia's dad was in my face. I'd never seen him so angry. He started saying something about how he trusted me, how Olivia had trusted me. I had no idea what he was talking about. I tried to ask what was going on, but that just made him angrier. That's when Ethan stepped forward, shaking his head like he was disappointed. "Show him," he said to the woman with him. She held out her phone. There were texts, photos, a video all supposedly showing me with her the night before. In the video, someone who looked kind of like me was going into her apartment building. The timestamp showed 11:43 p.m. I started to explain that it wasn't me, that I'd been at the hotel all night, but Ethan cut me off. "The hotel already confirmed you weren't in your room last night," he said, another lie. But how could I prove it? I turned off my phone, hadn't used my key card all night after getting in. It all happened so fast after that. Someone said Olivia had seen everything and left. Her mom was calling off the wedding. The guests were being told there was a family emergency. Ethan was there the whole time, playing the role of the devastated brother who'd had to expose his own flesh and blood's betrayal. I tried to run to the bridal suite to talk to Olivia, to explain, but her bridesmaids formed this wall in front of the door. One of them, her best friend Katie, just looked at me with such disgust and said, "Haven't you done enough?" Olivia wouldn't answer my calls or texts. Her dad threatened to call the cops if I didn't leave. My own parents just stood there, silent, while everything fell apart. And Ethan, he was comforting Olivia's family, telling them how sorry he was, how he'd had no choice but to tell them when he found out. I drove home in my wedding suit, sat in my apartment for hours trying to make sense of what had happened, called and texted Olivia until her number was disconnected, tried to get her friends to listen, but they'd all blocked me. Even went to her salon the next day, but she'd already arranged for someone else to cover her appointments. You know what the worst part was? I never even got to see her that day. Never got to tell her how beautiful she must have looked in her dress. Never got to defend myself or explain or fight for us. Everything we had, everything we'd planned it just vanished in the space of an hour. That night, sitting alone in my apartment, still wearing my wedding suit, I finally checked social media. Ethan had already posted about how heartbroken he was for Olivia, how sometimes the people we trust the most betray us. The comments were full of support for him and Olivia and hatred for me. I deleted all my social media accounts that night. The next week, I put in for a transfer to our Denver warehouse. 2 weeks later, I was gone. You know those movies where someone's life falls apart and then they show a montage of them moving to a new city and rebuilding everything? They make it look so easy. Guy gets a new job, finds a cool apartment, makes new friends, and boom, happy ending. Reality isn't like that at all. I took the transfer to Denver because it was the furthest warehouse position available that wouldn't require a pay cut. Packed everything I owned into my Civic and just left. Didn't even go to my parents' house to say goodbye, just sent Mom a text when I crossed the Colorado state line so she wouldn't report me missing or something. The first few months in Denver were a special kind of hell. I got this tiny studio apartment in a not great part of town because it was all I could afford after breaking my lease back home. I kept trying to figure out when exactly Ethan had started planning it all. Was it when Olivia and I got engaged? Earlier? Had he known that woman at O'Malley's all along? Every memory got twisted up with doubt. That's what Ethan was really good at, not just destroying your present, but making you question your entire past. Work was, well, work. The Denver warehouse was bigger than the one back home, more corporate. Nobody knew me or my history, which was both good and bad. Good because there were no rumors following me around, no weird looks or whispered conversations. Bad because I was completely alone. Do you know how hard it is to make friends in your 30s in a new city, especially when you're carrying around the kind of emotional baggage that would make a therapist need therapy? I tried dating a couple times that first year in Denver, nothing serious, just coffee meetups from dating apps, but I couldn't do it. Every time a woman would ask about my family or my past, I'd freeze up. How do you explain something like this? Oh, by The way my brother systematically destroyed my life and framed me for cheating on my fiancé on our wedding day. Yeah, that's a great first date conversation. I still checked her salon's website, sometimes not in a stalker way. I just wanted to know she was okay. She'd changed the name of the place about a year after everything happened, new logo, new everything. I guess she needed a fresh start too. My parents tried to keep in touch, but our conversations were always surface level. They'd talk about the weather, about their garden, about anything except Ethan or what had happened. They never apologized for standing there silently while he destroyed my life. I think they were too afraid to admit they'd enabled him all along. Ethan, meanwhile, was living his best life back home, according to Mom's occasional updates, which I never asked for, but she gave anyway. He'd started some kind of social media consulting business. Looking back now, that should have been another red flag, Ethan suddenly being successful at something. The worst moments were the anniversaries, not just of the wedding that never happened, but all the little dates that used to mean something. The day Olivia and I met, our first date, the day I proposed, each one was like getting punched in the gut all over again. Doctor Martinez said that was normal. That grief doesn't follow a timeline, but knowing something's normal doesn't make it hurt less. I did manage to build something resembling a life in Denver. Got promoted to operations manager, moved to a better apartment, made a few friends through a car restoration group I joined. Even adopted a cat from the shelter. His name's Otto. And yes, I know that's a terrible name for a cat, but he came with it and refuses to answer to anything else. Then, 3 years after I'd left Minnesota, my phone rang. It was a regular Tuesday night. I was just getting home from work, feeding Otto, my cat, when my phone lit up with her number. Almost didn't answer. Our conversations had gotten pretty stale over the years, just surface-level stuff about the weather and her garden, but something in her voice when she left a voicemail made me call back. She was crying, which wasn't unusual when it came to Ethan-related drama, but this was different. Turned out Ethan's girlfriend, remember, that woman from my wedding, had finally cracked. Not in some dramatic courtroom confession way, she just got drunk at a bar and started running her mouth to the wrong person. See, Ethan and this woman, her name's Rachel, had been together for years before my wedding. They had this thing going where they'd create drama at weddings and events, usually targeting people with money. They weren't masterminds or anything, just your garden variety scammers who got lucky a few times. They'd make up stories about cheating, cause scenes, then sometimes try to squeeze money out of people to keep quiet about even worse stuff they claimed to have. The person Rachel spilled this to at the bar, the sister of one of their other victims, and unlike me, this family didn't just roll over and leave town. They started digging, found patterns, same story about cheating the night before the wedding, same type of evidence, same woman showing up with the same accusations. When they started asking around, other stories came out too. Turns out Ethan and Rachel had pulled this at least 3 other times that we know of, not all weddings. Sometimes engagement parties or even anniversary celebrations, always targeting people who had something to lose, always using the same playbook. Olivia found out because our town isn't that big and people talk. One of her regular clients was cousins with one of the other victims, and when they realized the story matched well, word got back to Olivia pretty quick. I won't lie and say there was some big dramatic confrontation. Olivia sent me an email first, probably found my work address on LinkedIn or something. It was short, just asking if we could talk. Said she knew what Ethan had done, that she had been wrong, that she was sorry. Took me 3 days to respond. What do you even say to something like that? We met at this coffee shop downtown, not the one we used to go to. Neither of us needed those memories. She looked different, older, maybe. Had this streak of gray in her hair she didn't bother dyeing. First thing she did was slide a folder across the table, copies of text messages Rachel had sent to other people bragging about their scams when she was drunk. Screenshots of similar stories posted in some local Facebook groups. Nothing that would hold up in court, but enough to show a pattern. The real kicker? Ethan hadn't even been that careful about hiding it. He'd used the money from their blackmail schemes to fund his consulting business, but he was sloppy with the records. Rachel had kept receipts of everything literally. She had a whole notebook of dates, amounts, and targets. Guess she didn't trust Ethan not to screw her over too. Olivia cried when she apologized, said she should have known better, should have at least heard me out. I wanted to be angry with her, but honestly, I was just tired. Told her one understood why she believed it. Ethan had spent months setting it up, making it look real. Hell, he'd had years of practice manipulating people by then. We talked for maybe an hour, caught up on the basic stuff. Her salon's doing well. She took some business classes at the community college. I told her about my job in Denver, about Otto. It was nice, I guess, but also kind of empty. We're different people now. Ethan's not going to jail or anything dramatic like that. The statute of limitations is up on most of what they did. And it's all pretty much she said anyway. But his reputation in town is shot. His business is falling apart now that people know what he really is. Rachel moved to Wisconsin or Michigan, I think. Don't really care enough to keep track. My parents are trying to process everything. Dad's doing his usual silent treatment thing. Mom keeps calling to apologize. They're not selling their house or anything, but they're definitely done enabling Ethan. Last I heard, he moved back into their basement, which feels like karma in its own way. I'm heading back to Denver tomorrow, got a warehouse to run, a cat to feed, a life to live. Olivia asked if we could keep in touch, maybe be friends eventually. I told her I needed time to think about it. Some breaks don't heal clean, you know? Before I left the coffee shop, she gave me back this journal she'd found while cleaning out her salon storage room, one I'd written in before the wedding. Haven't opened it yet, not sure I will. Thanks for all the support, guys, and yeah, Otto's fine. He's currently trying to eat my shoelaces at the hotel. Edit. A lot of you are asking if I'm going to sue Ethan honestly. Not worth the hassle. Sometimes the best revenge is just living well. Edit 3. Stop trying to find Rachel's social media accounts. That's not helping anyone.